Can everyone hear me okay? I hope you enjoyed that little video that Rob got together for us. I don't know if you guys miss the ocean as much as I do after watching that. But yeah, definitely welcome. Thanks for joining us again. Yeah, so today we're going to be doing some reef fish identification, okay? But just before we get started there, just again wanted to say hello. Thanks again for joining us. Yeah, get yourselves nice and comfortable. And yeah, just a reminder to please do the quizzes, okay? You need to complete all of the quizzes that we put up to actually get that certificate of completion at the end, okay? So please do, please do finish those quizzes. And today's quiz has been posted, so straight after the lecture, you are more than welcome to go and have a look. Okay. So we'll just jump right into it. So like I said, we are going to start identifying some common reef fish in Sodwana. Okay, so I did get some requests yesterday to please include the scientific name, so I have done that, okay, for the families. Okay, so we are going to be just looking at fish families, all right? There's going to be 3 fish ID lectures that we do, and that's because there are just so many fish, and even then we really are just scratching the surface with what we are doing here, okay? But I hope that it really encourages you to keep being hungry to learn. There are heaps of resources available for you guys to use, so definitely do take advantage of that. And I did post a few extra things today, so you might have seen them already. But yeah. So another reminder, I do love this reef guide, okay? This is the one that I use when I am identifying things that I see underwater. So actually for all our identification lectures, I have noted the page number for that family that I'm talking about from this book. Okay, so if you do have this resource available to you, Dennis King and Walter Fraser's Reef Guide book, you'll see the page number in the top right hand corner. Okay, so do look out for that. It's great to have on hand during the lectures if you do have it. But yeah, no dramas if you don't. So first off, we have our butterfly fish, or Chaetodon, today. So these guys have a discoid body shape, okay? So that means that their body is quite round, all right? And you can probably see that in the pictures there. They also have what we call a concave nape. So we can see the forehead here. It kind of slopes a little bit, and then often they have that protruding snout. Okay, so we can see that snout. Their nose kind of sticks out a little bit more, a bit further from their body. Okay, and that's because they actually use their they feed on plankton or coral polyps. Okay, so they use their mouths as little tweezers to pick at individual coral polyps. So that's why they have that protruding mouth. Another a really common characteristic for butterfly fish is this this band that sits over the eye. So we call this a band that conceals the eye, okay? So we can see it in this example here. So it's just a darker coloration that hides where the eye is, okay? And then often they'll have a false eye spot towards the back of the fish as well. So on this example, you can see it here. On this example, you can see it right at the tip of the dorsal fin over here. Okay, now that concealed eye and the false eye spot is there to confuse their predators. Okay, so it confuses the predator. The predator doesn't know which way is the front and which way is the back. Okay, so predators tend to approach fish or their prey from the back. Okay, and so in these cases, the predator will attempt to approach its prey from this end, okay, thinking this is the front end, thinking this is the eye, but obviously this is actually the front end, and so the butterfly fish sees the predator coming and is able to escape nice and quickly. So butterfly fish, in terms of coloration, they always have some yellow on them, okay? They might not be the most predominant color. So for example, this species over here, okay, we can see it's mostly white and black, but we can still see there is a little bit of yellow. But yes, most of the butterfly fish always have some yellow in them, okay? Their typical coloration is yellow, black, and white, okay? So it'll be some kind of variation of those colors. There might be a little bit of blue or maybe some other colors as well, but in general terms, it's mostly just yellow, black, and white. We often find butterfly fish in mating pairs, okay, and they do like to use the reef for shelter and as a food source. Like we said, they feed on coral. Now, butterfly fish, the way they swim is they kind of flit from place to place, and when you watch them, it doesn't really look like they really know where they're going. Okay, so they don't really have any clear direction or destination in mind. They kind of just go. So that's kind of a nice indication when you are watching fish, working out how they swim. So these are some examples of some of the common butterfly fish that we find in Sodwana. Okay, so having a look at them, this one is our white-spotted butterfly fish. Okay, in all of these examples, you can see those common butterfly fish characteristics. Okay, so we can see it's got that rounded body or discoid body. Okay, we can see that kind of sloping forehead and the protruding snout. All right. Again, we can also see that concealed eye. So this one, he's got kind of a bluer stripe over his face there. This one, it's a bit smaller, but it is concealing the eye. Okay, in our raccoon or half moon butterfly fish on this side, you can see the eye is concealed there. This one also gives us a false eye spot example. So you can see the false eye spot in the back here, and again in our long-nosed butterfly fish again. So you can see this one definitely is feeding on coral polyps because he's got that really long snout that he uses to pick at those individual polyps. Angelfish is another one of our really common reef species. Okay, the scientific name for the angelfish family is Pomacanthidae. Okay, and that's got to do with the spine. All right, so they've got a little spine that sits on the gill cover. Okay, so you can see it sitting right over here. It's quite obvious in this species. Again, in this one here, you can see that spine sitting over here. All right, so angelfish they are actually quite similar to butterfly fish when you first look at them, okay, but there are some key distinguishing features. So again, that spine, okay, butterfly fish do not have that spine, all right, that spine on that gill cover is unique for angelfish, okay. Angelfish always have some blue in them as well. Okay, so like we were saying, the butterfly fish is always yellow, some kind of yellow in them. The angelfish, there's always some blue. Again, they are very brightly colored and they have quite a varied diet. Okay, so some species of angelfish eat sponge, some eat algae, some eat invertebrates, some eat kind of a mixture of all of them. Okay, it kind of just depends. Now, the cool thing about angelfish is we've actually got an endemic species of angelfish in Sodwana. So this species over here, this is our tiger angelfish, okay? And it is endemic to the area from about Mozambique down to Alawal Shoal and kind of out towards Madagascar. Now, this is a deep water species. So we actually only find this species at about 25 meters or deeper, okay? And so the place that we have seen it quite a lot in Sodwana is actually on our lettuce reef. So again, another reason to go and visit that beautiful lettuce reef that we have there. Okay, having a look at this fish over here. So this is actually a juvenile angelfish. So you'll remember from our lecture yesterday is that we did speak about colorations and markings and that kind of thing, and we learned that with angelfish, they actually change color from juvenile to adult. All right, so this is an example of the juvenile coloration. All right, and this is actually the adult of this same species. So this is our emperor angelfish. So you can see the juvenile coloration is these blue and white concentric rings, okay? And then when they turn into an adult, they actually have these kind of horizontal stripes instead. So that's pretty cool. These are some of the common examples of angelfish that we see in Sodwana Bay. In all of these species, you should be able to quite easily identify them as angelfish, again, by looking at that spine. Okay, so let's have a look. The spine on this one, on our 3-spot angelfish, is here in the front here. Our regal or royal angelfish, we can see the spine over here. Our semicircle angelfish, we can see it over here. This is our old woman angelfish, okay, and we can't see the spine too well here, okay. It's quite reduced, but it is there, and it's a lot easier to see when you're up close and personal with this fish. Now, the cool thing about this species in particular is they seem to be quite curious. Okay, they quite like hanging around divers. They're quite interested in our bubbles. Okay, so you might have noticed these angelfish coming to say hello to you on your safety stops and things like that. Okay, they come and kind of nibble at the bubbles that we make, so they seem to be quite interested in what we're doing underwater, which is great. Okay, so I've included these two kind of smaller angelfish species because not a lot of people actually recognize that angelfish can they grow quite small as well. So we have some like relatively smaller species. Okay, so this one at the top here, this is our dusky cherub, okay? And this one here is our jumping bean or African pygmy angelfish. Again, we know that they are angelfish because we can see those little spines. Okay, so just because they're a little bit smaller than what we're used to seeing in terms of angelfish, doesn't exclude them from the group. Again, I've included the pictures of the juveniles here, again, just to remind you. So, this is our juvenile semicircle angelfish. Okay, so we can see those kind of concentric semicircle bands or rings or whatever you want to call it. And then again, these concentric rings on our juvenile emperor angelfish. Alright, the Moorish idol or Zanclidae. Okay, now the special thing about Moorish idols is that they are actually the only species in this family, alright? They don't have any other family members, they don't have any other species or genera in this family. It's just them all on their own. And they are actually quite closely related to sturgeonfish. So the way we identify the Moorish idol is it's got this really characteristic long thread fin, or it's a extended dorsal filament, okay? And then it's also got this really distinct yellow triangle or saddle shape on its snout. Okay, so those are the two main things that you want to look for when you are trying to identify Moorish idol. Other distinguishing features are, of course, these pair of black bands, okay, separated by this whiter area on the body. And on this white area, you can see it's kind of like a watercolor effect, kind of coloring of yellow on it. Okay, now these guys are often confused with coachman or bannerfish or anything like that, okay? And we know that the coachman and the bannerfish are actually a type of butterfly fish, okay? So I've put the two next to each other just so you can see, all right? From first glance, it is quite easy to mix them up, okay? Because they've both got that, those dark bands. We can see a little flash of yellow, so maybe if it was kind of swimming away from you, you'd probably struggle to identify it. Okay, so again, I'm just going to point out those key characteristics. Again, looking at our Moorish idol, we're going to look for that yellow saddle or yellow triangle that we can see on its snout, and again, that kind of watercolor effect of yellow that sits on that white bit in between the two black bands. So we can see on our coachman here, that yellow bit is missing, all right, and again, that saddle on the snout is missing as well. Okay, so now you guys are going to be pros at identifying Moorish idols versus coachman or bannerfish. up we have surgeonfish, or Acanthuridae. So these fish have more of an oval shape, okay, and they're kind of small or medium sized. So they don't get super big. They've got these small, I guess, yeah, relatively small eyes that sit quite high up on their foreheads. Okay, so you can see the eyes are quite high up on the head, all right, and they've got nice small mouths. They've got a concave tail, so it kind of looks a bit like a half moon or something like that. Okay, but the key feature of surgeonfish is they have a spine on what we call the caudal peduncle. Okay, now the caudal peduncle is basically the bit of the fish that connects the tail or the caudal fin to the body. Okay, so this bit here is our caudal peduncle, and we can see that little spine over there. Now that spine is razor sharp, okay? The reason we call them surgeonfish is because that spine is as sharp as a doctor's scalpel. Okay, so that is why they are called surgeonfish. Now surgeonfish are really important for our reef because they are grazers of algae. So they're like our cows. They're like our little lawnmowers, that they keep the algae, like that, you know, kind of fleshy algae, nice and short, okay, so it doesn't overgrow the corals and choke the corals out. Okay, so it's really important that we look after our herbivores, our lawnmowers of the reef, because they make sure that everything stays nice and healthy. We also have a few kind of subfamilies or other little groups of fish that belong to the surgeonfish family as well. So the first one we're going to talk about is the tang. Okay, I have an example of a tang on the next slide, all right, and I will point it out. Have a look for the enlarged dorsal and anal fins on that example. The example we have on this slide over here, this one over here, is a unicorn fish. Okay, now unicorn fish are a subfamily of surgeonfish. Okay, now there's a few little distinguishing characteristics between the two, which I'll point out now. So first off, they might have like a little protrusion. It might be quite long, like in this example, or it might just be like a little bump on the forehead, that kind of thing. Okay, that generally is quite obvious. The one that is mostly obvious, though, that is probably the best feature that you want to look for, though, is again at the caudal peduncle. So we know our surgeonfish has one little spine that sits on the caudal peduncle, and it can actually be retracted. Okay, so it actually usually sits flush against the fish's body, and when the fish is threatened, he flicks his tail out and pushes the spine out, okay, to defend himself. Now the thing with unicorn fish is they actually have two of these spines, okay, and those spines do not retract. So those spines are always out. They are always, you know, extended, ready to go. So those are things that you can look for. So looking at these examples here, okay, again, looking at those key characteristics, all right, we can see all of these guys are kind of that oval shaped. All right, and we are looking for that spine. So in this example, that spine is quite obvious. Again, in this one, our lieutenant surgeonfish down at the bottom here, we can see that spine is quite obvious there. This one over here is our blue-banded surgeonfish. Okay, this is our pallet surgeonfish. You might recognize it as Dory from Finding Nemo. And this one here is our powder blue surgeonfish. So we can see in these examples that spine isn't very obvious, and that's just the coloration of the fish. So the coloration of the fish kind of masks where that spine is, but I can assure you that spine is there and it is ready to be used, okay, if needed. Here's one of our unicorn fish. Okay, so we can see that there are two of those spines that sit on that caudal peduncle. Okay, but notice here we can't really see much of a bump on the forehead. So again, really important, the characteristic you want to look for when you are trying to distinguish whether it is a unicorn fish or a surgeonfish is actually looking at that caudal peduncle. And then, of course, we have our unicorn fish over here. Again, the double spine on the caudal peduncle and the protrusion on the head. So this is our example of our tang. Okay, this is a sailfin tang, and you can see that it's got those really extended, beautiful dorsal and anal fins that we can look for. Our triggerfish, or Ballistidae. Okay, so these are kind of oval or diamond-shaped bodies, and they can grow quite large depending on the species. Triggerfish kind of have a bit of a reputation on our reefs. I'm sure a lot of you have stories to tell about triggerfish, but they have a spine that can be locked up in an upright position. So this first dorsal spine, they can lock it up, okay? And they use that actually to defend themselves. And so what they'll do is they'll dart into the reef, okay, into a little crevice, like our little red fang triggerfish at the bottom here. He's got a bit scared out in the open, so he's darted into a little hole, and he's locked that spine up. Okay, so he's basically hanging on. All right, he doesn't want anything to pull him out to eat him, so he's going to stay inside that hole with that spine flicked up and in that locked upright position until he thinks that the coast is clear and that it's safe to come out again. The cool thing about triggerfish, though, is that they have what we call, or they move by what we call ballistiform movement. Okay, so ballistiform, okay, that's coming off this scientific name here, Ballistidae. All right, so ballistiform swimming basically just means undulating these fins over here. So that's how they swim usually. Okay, so they undulate the dorsal and the anal fins. All right, and then they will use their tail if they need a little bit of speed. So whether they're being chased or whether they feel a bit threatened, that kind of thing, they'll then use their tail. But for just normal, general, kind of relaxed kind of swimming, they will undulate those dorsal and anal fins. Now, these guys have quite strong, sharp teeth, okay? So they consume shellfish and crustaceans, so things that are quite hard-shelled, that kind of thing. So they need teeth and jaws that can crush and bite and that kind of thing. So they've got really strong teeth. And I've got a nice picture on the next slide actually showing you an example of their teeth. Now, like I said earlier, these guys have a bit of a reputation, okay? And that's because they can be quite aggressive, all right? And they become aggressive when it's breeding season, that kind of thing. So they are defending their territories and defending their eggs. Okay, so they are doing their natural kind of behaviors, all right? So often divers can, cause some stress when we get too close, if it is this territorial kind of period in their life cycles. I just want to remind you guys just to kind of, look out where you are. We don't want our impacts or our, presence on the reef to have any negative impacts, okay? So we don't want to stress fish out. We always want to be observing passively. So definitely do kind of keep your distance from these guys if you do see them on our reefs. They are beautiful to look at, but we do know that they do defend their territories quite aggressively. So having a look at some of our examples, our quite classic example is our red fang triggerfish, okay? I know lots of divers who can tell us stories of all the little bite marks that they've received over, like on their fins or on wetsuits and that kind of thing from these guys. I know I've got a few little bite marks in my fins when I've got a little bit too close accidentally. This one here is our kind of king, okay? So he's our Titan triggerfish. I think he's probably the biggest one that we get, okay? And they can get quite large. And again, they do defend their territories quite aggressively. We've got our orange-striped triggerfish over here, the Picasso triggerfish over here, and then our clown triggerfish over here, giving us a nice view of that jaw. So you can see those nice strong teeth used for crushing. They are quite well equipped to eat what they do. Next up, we have our damselfish, or Pomacentridae. So these are oval or disc-shaped small fish, okay? So these guys tend to stay quite small. They've got, relatively compressed bodies and terminal mouths. Okay, so just a reminder, a terminal mouth means it's just sitting at the very end of the body. Okay, so it's not sitting, up on top of the head. It's not an upwards facing mouth. It's not sitting quite low on the chin. All right, it is sitting kind of right in the front of the head. Okay, so that's what we call a terminal mouth. Now, the thing with the damselfish is there's actually quite a lot of variation in the caudal fin shape and the coloration. Okay, so there's not really any distinct, I guess, caudal fin shapes that I can give you because, it depends on the species. It's one of those things where you just need to kind of get used to what species fall into that category. So again, looking through reef guides is really helpful. That's kind of how I learned this one, is I just kind of flick through reef guides, get to learn the pictures and that kind of thing. And then when I find them on the reef, it's like, okay, yes, I can see those characteristics and that kind of thing. Again, these guys can be quite territorial, and they will also quite aggressively defend their territories and their eggs. The only thing is they're a lot smaller than triggerfish are, so we tend not to get too I guess wary of these guys. But like I said, our presence may be stressing them out still when they are feeling that they need to aggressively defend their territory. So it is a good idea if you do notice that one is kind of coming for you and kind of trying to chase you away, just back off a little bit, maybe move away, just so that you aren't having that kind of a negative impact on them. Now you'll see here I've got anemone fish. So anemone fish are actually part of the damselfish family. All right, so they're kind of like a little subfamily. So we do include them in this group. So looking at some of our common damselfish here, this is probably one that you guys have seen if you are divers. All right, these are our domino fish. Or three-spot damselfish. So dominoes, or the three-spot damsels, it's actually not an anemone fish, all right? But the juveniles have evolved the ability to protect themselves from that anemone sting. Okay, so that's why we often see the juveniles in the anemones along with the anemone fish, but this species in particular is not actually an anemone fish, okay? These guys are two-bar humbugs, all right? We see them quite often. If you have a look in like Acropora or, those kinds of corals, so things with like little fingers or little branches, or like table corals with little fingers coming out of them, we often see these little humbugs hiding in amongst that coral. I know there's one on Bikini in particular that there's always the humbugs and then the juvenile palate surgeonfish as well, so that's always quite nice to see them. And then of course we have our anemone fish over here. So we've got this one is our two-bar anemone fish, and then our nose stripe anemone fish on this side. So this one here is a sergeant major. Okay, now there's actually 6 species within the genus that this fish falls into, and they're all quite similar in shape. Okay, so the body shape is quite similar. They all have these dark bands that kind of go down the body like that, but not all of them have this yellow. Okay, and each species has a different kind of tail shape as well. So like I was saying, the tail shape is quite variable. You can see even amongst the groupings that we have here, we've got one that's quite forked. This one has a bit of a shallower notch. Our anemone fish, it's more like rounded, I guess. So definitely a lot of variation that you can see right there. But yeah, they're pretty cool. They're quite feisty little fish. I enjoy seeing damselfish on our reefs. All right, next up we have our fusiliers. So our fusiliers are also known as Cesionidae, okay? And these are our slender, streamlined bodied fish, okay? They've got a symmetrical, deeply forked caudal fin or tail, which we can see in this example here, okay? I like to kind of describe these fish as they've got that typical fish shape, okay? So if a child was going to draw a fish, this is probably the fish that they would end up drawing, okay? Because it's that classic fish shape, it's kind of that oval-ish body with the pointy face, and then yeah, that forked tail at the back. So that forked tail indicates to us that it's quite a fast moving fish. Okay, so in general in fish, the deeper the fork of the tail, so the deeper this fork here, the faster the fish moves. Okay, now you'll see you often find these in big groups. Okay, so they like hanging around in big groups of, yeah, however many they like can fit, really. But that's because there is safety in numbers. Okay, so they are looking after each other when there's lots of them, because predators find it a bit more difficult to single out individual fish. Okay, so that's why fish like to be in big groups. So again, here's just some examples of the common kind of fusiliers that we see in Sodwana. All right, now fusiliers, we tend to find these guys closer to the surface waters, actually. So they don't spend too much time close to the reef at all. They spend most of their time quite high up in the water, sometimes literally just at the surface kind of thing. And that's because they hunt plankton. So they feed on plankton, okay, and that plankton is going to mostly be in more of the surface waters, okay. So that's why we see them closer to the top. Often on our boats, as our boats are kind of heading out towards our various dive sites, we actually see the schools of fusiliers from the boat. So these guys, we can see that really bright yellow band that they've got on the top of their bodies. So they're quite nice to see. Snappers, or Lutjanidae. So these are kind of medium-sized fish. They can get fairly large, but they've got these kind of oblong bodies and quite a triangular head. So we can see here it's got quite a triangle-shaped head. Yeah. Having a look at its tail, it's got quite a shallow notch. All right, so it's not a very deeply forked tail. Okay, it's more of a shallowly forked tail. And we'll see that the eyes are set fairly low on the head as well, so they're not too high up. They're quite close to the mouth. Now these guys can either be solitary or form, medium to large groups, kind of depending on the species. So for example, this one over here, this is our red snapper. They tend to be solitary. They tend to kind of hang around on their own, where our other examples, like our humpback snapper and our blue-banded snappers, they like to form those big schools, again, for that protection. Okay, now you'll see these fish over here, they're yellow. Okay, they're in a big group. They look a bit like our fusiliers. So a lot of people do get those big schools of the blue-banded snappers and the fusiliers confused. All right, so again, you want to have a look at the head and the tail. So we'll see the head here. It's more of a triangle shape, okay, where the fusiliers, it's sometimes a bit rounded or it's very, very pointy. Okay, so these guys, they are definitely that triangle head. And then looking at the tail, all right, again, remembering that shallow notch in the tail of snappers, where fusiliers have that really deep forked tail. So looking at some of the species we get, this is an example of a black beauty snapper, okay? And now this one is actually a juvenile of the black beauty snapper. The adult tends to be more dull in appearance. It actually doesn't have any of these, bands or stripes or dots or anything like that, the adult. It's just kind of a boring grey colour, I guess. So they're a lot more cool to see when they're juveniles. They tend to be a little bit shy as well. So if you do see them on the reefs, count yourself lucky. We don't see them too often, particularly as juveniles. So they are quite cool to see. This one over here is our speckled snapper. They can get quite large. Again, you can see that kind of triangle head and that shallow notch in the caudal fin. And then, of course, like I said, our humpback snappers and our blue-banded snappers that like to form those large schools and shoals. Now we have our jacks or trevallies, okay, or Corangidae. Now the jacks and trevallies, those are basically your kingfish, okay. You'll see that they are kind of medium to large fish, okay, and they've got this laterally compressed fusiform body shape. Okay, so fusiform just means that it's kind of built for speed. Okay, so it's quite streamlined, everything is nice and tucked away, ready to go, ready to be fast. Okay. Another reason we can see this is a fast fish is, again, looking at that forked tail. So we can see these have a very deeply forked caudal fin, okay? And then even another example of, seeing that this is a really fast fish is this reinforced caudal peduncle. Okay, so we can kind of see this little line on the fish here, all right? That is a layer of subdermal plates or scutes that basically just give the tail a little bit more of reinforcement. So it gives it a bit more strength, a bit more rigidity. It's a bit stronger so that it can, really use its muscles and swim nice and fast. Okay. We know that these are open water hunters, all right, so they tend to hunt and kind of swim around more in the open water, so you'll probably find them more along like the fringes of reefs, so kind of towards the outer edges of the reef, and that's because that coloration of theirs, that silvery kind of coloration, helps them blend in with that open water. Having a look at some of our species of Jackson trevallies. We've got our bluefin kingfish over here. All right, this is our amberjack, okay? We've got a pompano over here, a queenfish over here, and then lots of little juvenile golden trevallies showing that piloting behavior, so that symbiotic relationship that we learned about yesterday. Okay, so these are some of the examples of the common ones that we see here. Again, having a look at those common key characteristics of this group, we can again see that really deeply forked tail, that reinforced caudal peduncle, more obvious on this picture here, I guess, and you can kind of see it here. And then that fusiform fish shape. Okay, so nice and streamlined, everything is ready to go for speed. Cool, so what we're going to do now, we're going to do a little bit of a practice quiz, I guess, okay, before you do your quiz online. So just while you're sitting at home, have a look at these pictures and kind of try to guess what kind of fish it is. So for example, this one over here, we can see that it's there's two fish, all right, there's a species here and a species here, but they're both sitting in anemones. Okay, so it's quite simple for us to identify them as damselfish. All right, so when you do your quiz, okay, we're only going to the family level. We don't expect you guys to be complete boffins straight away in your fish ID. All right, just to family level is fine. Okay, so damselfish would be this one. Next one, we have our more, let's have a look at what this is. I nearly gave away the answer. Okay, so looking at, there's this long thread fin over here. It's got that kind of extended snout, so maybe it's a butterfly fish, but we can see here it's got that yellow saddle or the yellow triangle that sits on its nose, and we've got that kind of yellow coloration on the body here. So if you guessed Moorish idol, you are right. Sorry for nearly giving it away there. Okay, having a look at this one. So this is the one we often get the Moorish idol confused with, correct? So we can see, again, that long thread fin there, all right? It's got a bit of a protruding snout there, but we don't see that yellow saddle, and we don't see any yellow coloration on the body here. So if you guessed butterfly fish, you are right. All right, having a look at this one. Okay, so we can see it's kind of that diamond-shaped body. All right, so diamond-shaped body. We can see that he is currently using his anal and dorsal fins to swim by undulating them. Okay, and we can see those really strong teeth, which suggests that this fish kind of crushes its prey. Okay, so it probably eats like sea urchins or shellfish, that kind of thing. So if you guessed triggerfish, you are correct. All right, so just a quick note, you will see that this triggerfish doesn't have his little spine up currently. Okay, so that is, they generally keep it flattened against the head, so like this one over here. But yeah, so those other characteristics is what you would use to help you with identifying that fish. Next up, we have our this example. So we can see it's kind of a silvery fish. It looks like it's got quite a deeply forked tail, which we can see from the friend in the background over here. Again, looking at that reinforced caudal peduncle. So if you did guess jacks or trevallies, you are correct. This one over here, we can see it's kind of got that like oval or disc-shaped fish, okay? Again, it's quite yellow, so maybe it's a butterfly fish, okay? But then if we have a closer look over here, we can see that spine. So again, we are going to say that it is a angelfish. Okay, so remember that angelfish have the spine on the gill cover. Cool. So this next one, all right, it's got more of an oval body, okay? The eyes are quite high up on the head. It's got a relatively small mouth, okay, and it seems to have a bit of a semicircle tail, I guess. That key characteristic over there, though, if you look really closely, you will see that spine on the caudal fin. So if you guessed surgeonfish, you are correct. Our next one, all right, so this is one of our smaller fish, okay? It's got kind of an oval body, all right? So you'll remember my little, what I said earlier is that these guys have quite a varied tail shape, okay? So if you guessed damselfish, you are correct. So this big school of fish here, okay, if we have a look at some characteristics, we've got the triangular head, the shallow notched caudal fin, okay, and it is forming quite a large group. So if you guessed snapper, you are correct. Here we have another kind of oval shaped fish, okay, so we can see the kind of sloping forehead, the long protruding snout. All right, we can see that eye is a little bit concealed there. So if you guessed butterfly fish, you are correct. All right, this is quite a nice example of one of our fish that change color. Okay, so if you remember, let's have a look over here. You can see that spine over here. So firstly, if you guessed angelfish, you are correct. Now, this is actually an example of a fish that is currently going through that transition phase. So you can see those concentric rings of the juvenile coloration, okay, sitting behind the adult coloration that's coming through. So you can see that this kind of paler section over here, this is the color changing. So you can see those horizontal stripes coming through, sitting kind of over that concentric ring pattern. So that is one that is currently transitioning between juvenile and adult. Next up, we have another, fairly large group of fish or school of fish, okay? So having a look at the characteristics, we can see that it is kind of your classic fish shape, okay? So remember, it's, that classic fish shape, and it's got that really deep fork. All right, so that suggests to us that it is a fusilier. So if you guessed fusilier, you are correct. Next up, we have our this little friend. So we're having a look over here. We can see two spines on the caudal peduncle, okay? We can see a tiny bit of a hump here, but remember, that's not the characteristic that we really look for in this example, okay? So we're really looking at that spine over here. So if you guessed unicorn fish, you are correct, okay? But even if you just said it was a surgeonfish, that would also be correct, okay? Because remember, the unicorn fish are a subfamily of the surgeonfish. So we are going to class this as a surgeonfish for your quiz. All right, having a look at this one. So again, we can see that kind of classic fish shape and that deeply forked tail. So if you did guess fusilier, you are correct. And And then we have this group over here. So again, it looks quite similar to the previous one, okay? Again, it's quite yellow. You know, there's a lot of them in this group. But if we have a look, we can see that really triangular head, hey? And also looking at that tail, it's more of a shallow notch. So if you guessed snapper, you are correct. All right, and lastly, we have this guy. So he looks like a fast swimmer. Okay, we can see that from the tail that's over here, that deeply forked tail. Can kind of see a bit of caudal, peduncle, you know, reinforcement over here, but otherwise he does look quite streamlined and ready to go. So if you said Jack or Trevally, you are correct. Alrighty guys, so that's it for today. I know the signal hasn't been great. It has started raining here where I am, so I'm sorry that has kind of affected the signal a little bit. But I hope that was helpful for you guys. I hope you enjoyed that. Yeah, just a reminder to do the quiz, okay? I don't think we'll worry about doing questions tonight just because of the signal. It's a bit funny, so yeah, just look after yourselves. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you tomorrow.